Here's how to disassemble a matter and form rotary table. Step 1 is to remove the rubber sleeve. Simply peel back the rubber. Step 2 is to remove the single center screw that is holding down a thrust bearing. There are 2 washers and a thrust bearing. This top piece can now be removed. If you have difficulty getting it off, that's probably because the boss has been deformed by the screw. Simply just remove the top with a little bit of force. Once the top cover has been removed, you should have 2 washers, grooved washers, and a single thrust bearing. Keep those aside with your screw. Inside, we have a strain relief for the main cable, the main PCB that does the detection of the rotary encoder, and the motor itself. In order to remove the cable, I first dislodge the cable from the connector on the PCB. I use a pair of tweezers to gently push between the connection points and try to gently. We'll take a little bit of force, but try to gently remove the connector. Next step will be to remove the strain relief cable, which is here. Finally, the cable can be removed through the opening in the back of the unit, including the strain relief. To remove the motor, simply remove the connector. I like to use a pair of tweezers to slide in between the connector and the housing. The rubber glue here can just simply be pulled away gently. This rubber glue is only there in order to keep the cable from interfering with the turntable. Finally, remove the 2 screws for the motor. The 2 screws are sandwiching 2 white rubber soft bushings to help the motor and the vibrations of the motor stay down to keep the noise down. Once the motor's been removed, you can finally remove the circuit board. There are simply 2 screws. Be careful not to miss the screws with your screwdriver, as you will scratch the board or possibly remove a component. Remember, when handling the PCB, handle it from the side in order to avoid any sort of electrostatic discharge. I also like to make sure that everything is clean on the board before putting new components back in. These bearings should rotate freely without any problems. And I want to make sure there's no extra pieces or debris that's been left behind. To reassemble, we are going to put the components back in reverse. I'm going to use the same components as I took out because this unit is not broken. They can be assembled in almost any order, but I like to put the PCB in screwed down the PCB last. It just makes putting the cables in that much easier. When screwing in the motor, be sure not to put too much pressure. We should see some deforming on the bushings, and this should be fairly hand tight. If the motor is not tight enough, it will sit hot, it'll sit proud and rub against the rotary part of the turntable. Now make sure the cable is guided in these slots. If there's rubber left over, it may actually help to keep the cables down. If you're finding the cable is sitting up from the channel, you can use a bit of Kapton tape or fabric tape to keep it down. Hot glue is also fine, just make sure we don't burn any of the plastic or wires. To put the cable back in, feed it in from behind. We want to make sure we pick the correct slot because there's only one slot for the cable to come in and have a channel for. For the cable, the strain relief clip can be a little difficult to move against the silicone wire. So aim for about 2.5 inches up from the end of the connector and make sure that the clip, has the flat side down, not the crimped side. The screws needed for the internal mechanisms are all the same except for the strain relief clip, which is the same screw for the outer case. The strain relief clip, it's important not to pinch the cable, so we want to make sure that the cable has moved back on the clip as far as possible. You can leave the clip a little loose before we assemble the full unit and then tighten it down after everything's been connected. Next is to assemble the connectors together on the PCB. Please make sure that the connectors are oriented in the proper direction. They should only be able to go in comfortably in one direction only. The motor connector can be a little finicky because it's not mounted to the board with additional ground pins. There's only 2 pins, so if you push too hard, you will bend it upwards. So if that happens, gently push it down. Try not to break the pins. If it's poking up a little bit, it shouldn't be too bad, but try to make sure that it's fairly flat. Use your thumb and forefinger when squeezing the clip together to avoid this problem. Finally, position the PCB with the through-hole pegs for alignment. You should be able to see the screw hole beside the optical encoders and in the corner here. These screws should only be hand tightened. They don't have to be specifically tight. We don't want to damage the board. Lastly, make sure the cables are seated into their channels properly. And then finally, screw down anything that is still loose, like the guide clip. At this point, we're ready to put the case back on. Simply put the top shell back on. To install the bearings, first take your washer that may still actually be in the channel, flat side down, groove side up, then the thrust bearing, then the last washer with the groove side down. When they're all installed, you should have a flush with the inside boss. Take the remaining screw, the large screw here with the flange, and assemble. When assembling the top shell screw, the tightness you need is going to be subjective to your unit. If you can move the top shell up and down, that is not tight enough. Simply tighten the screw until you can no longer feel vertical play in the unit. There should still be left and right play. Lastly, the rubber membranes have 3 nipples here that can correspond with any of these 6 holes. I like to take my finger, line up one of the nipples with one of the holes, and then that gives me alignment for the rest of the unit. Make sure you push down the remaining nipples into the holes. If you can't seat them, simply peel back to reveal the nipple and the hole, push it into place. And that is a fully assembled matter and form turntable.